Trinity Bible Church in Rock Hill, South Carolina for the past 11 years. He is joyfully married to Carissa for 18 years, and he has 2 daughters, Rose Catherine, who is 14, and during the summer on her break, she happened to come to visit some of us here, and we got to meet her. And also Mary Elizabeth, who is 10 years old. He avidly loves books, technology, airliners, and golf. Matthew is working on his Competent Communications Manual on project number 5, which is Your Body Speaks. The timeline, as was mentioned, is 5 to 7 minutes, and his goals is to use stance, movement, gestures, facial expressions, and eye contact to express the message and achieve the speech's purpose. His speech is entitled Lost and Found. Please welcome to our goal-setting stage, Pastor Matthew James.
Thank you, Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and guests, good morning. I don't often touch a football, but when my friend Walt and his 11-year-old son brought one along with them, I didn't want to be a fuddy-duddy, so I decided to join in the fun. We had met at Fuel Pizza, and we were eating outside this past fall, enjoying a beautiful evening. And after we finished our pizza, we started tossing the ball back and forth, and that quickly developed into a rousing game of monkey in the middle. And there was a fountain in the center of this plaza that we were sitting in, a hexagonal, big and beautiful structure. And a couple of times the ball had gone into the water, and on this one occasion when it fell into the water, I ran over there with the 11-year-old kid and I said, "You better get away from that ball. I'll push you in that water, boy." And I finally beat the 11-year-old and got the ball, and I came back with the thrill of victory fresh in my pumping heart, and I tossed it back over to Walt, and everything was going great until I noticed So Walt says, "You looking for something?" I said, "Yeah, my ring is gone. My college ring is gone." I noticed it had been loose on my cold, wet hands earlier before, but I thought I could be careful enough with it. So now I'm trying to imagine what kind of trajectory it might have traveled on. Didn't hear it tinkling across the concrete. There's the fountain over here. There's a hedgerow of bushes over there. So Walt starts to pitch in for me, and you have to appreciate how we exhausted all of our energies looking for this ring, this tiny gold ring. 5 minutes of searching turned into 10. 10 minutes of searching turned into 15. And I want to tell you, when you are examining every square inch of a large plaza like that, 15 minutes of looking, 20 minutes of looking feels like an eternity. At first I felt pretty optimistic that we were going to be able to recover it. But as minute added on to minute and section added on to section, I began to lose hope. And finally, I just had to resign, and I had to say, "Lord, the only way we're going to get that ring back is if you give it back. Of all of us here looking for it, you're the only one that knows where it is." I tried to convince myself that it really wasn't that big a deal. None of my kids are in the hospital. Nobody in my family's fighting leukemia. I've got a warm place to sleep tonight. I'll get up in the morning and go about life regularly. Nothing is going to have to slow down for this. It's no big deal. But I couldn't turn it off. I couldn't stop worrying about it. The next day, I drove to teach my class down in Wagner, South Carolina. As I passed by that exit, I looked over to where I knew my ring was, and I said, "God, please take care of it." I asked my friends in the Metal Detecting Club of South Carolina if they would help me to go over there. They said, "Yeah, they'd be glad to help." You know. And I said, "If you find it, you'll know it's mine because my name is engraved on the inside of it." And my buddy said, "Well, that won't matter at the pawn shop." I said, "Oh, thank you for that bit of reassurance." Yes, sirree, Bob. Monday evening was the losing. Tuesday morning, I prayed for God to take care of it while I drove to class. Wednesday morning, I had to come to Toastmasters, and all the while this is on my mind. Finally, on Wednesday afternoon, I got in touch with the guy who runs the maintenance of that fountain. And I said to him, "Man, if you can meet me there, I think once we get the jets turned off, if the water will get still in that fountain, if it's in there, I think we can see it. He said, I'll be there at 7:30 tomorrow morning. On my way to meet him, he called me and he said, Matthew, I've got your ring.
Oh.
And he gave it back to me, and I was so happy about it. And so I asked him, where did you find it? He said, as soon as I turned off those jets, it stood out like a sore thumb. I said, well, where was it? He said, it was right there in this first panel underneath that first jet. Now, you have to know that whoever designed this fountain at Manchester Village engraved the fruit of the Spirit all the way around it. I said, you mean this fountain, this jet right here? He said, yeah. I said, you mean the one that has the word peace above it? He said, yeah. And I don't know if that is so cool to anybody but me, but I thought it was so tender of our Heavenly Father.
Amen.
While I was tied up with anxiety about this, all the while He was guarding my ring in peace. Before this, I would have thought that my stuff was not so critically important to me. I would have thought that I could take losses and not have it monopolize my thinking and my feeling the way that it did. But I found out some things about myself that day. I found out through that episode in my life that my stuff is a whole lot more important to me than I would really care to admit. And I found out some things about my God that day. My God cares about me a whole lot more deeply than I've really learned to believe. As I look back on that episode, I'm convinced that God was shaping me. God was pressing me into His mold. God was refining me. And God was preparing me for the day that I would wake up to my wife yelling, "Fire!" and we would run out of the house in our underwear. God was getting us ready for that greater loss. And through all of those things that God has led us and sustained us, I've seen the fingerprints of His tender, loving care all along. And so now, He's taught me to say, the only way I'll get, and now I can fill in the blank with a lot of things, the only way I'll get that back is if God gives it back. And I am blown away by how tenderly merciful our Heavenly Father is. Madam Toastmaster.